everybody, and welcome to the News Geezers Lunch for May of 2018. Great to have you here, and for those of you who I didn't get a chance to say hello to yet, like Linda Deutsch, it's nice to have you here, okay? And for all of you, thank you for coming. We have a fair bit to get through, so that's why I'm starting just a touch earlier. I do want to mention our website, newsgeezers.com, which has photos, videotapes going back 3 or 4 years, as well as always the latest news of the upcoming meeting. And speaking of which, the following meetings for the rest of 2018 will be Saturday, August the 11th, and Saturday, November the 10th. Programs to be explained as we go along. The other website to mention is 8ballfoundation.com. A lot of you in this room have been very generous and have donated to 8Ball. I am the immediate past chairman and stepped down from that position a couple of months ago. Tony Valdez, who is retired from Fox 11, took it over, doing a very capable job. It is 8ballfoundation.com, and if you want to go to that site, you'll see we've been helping journalists in financial need, temporary financial need, for over 60 years, and your contributions are really appreciated. Again, it's 8ballfoundation.com using the number 8. Now comes the hard part for me. And I've been dreading this for the last month. The person who usually sits where Gary and Professor John are was Michael Connelly. Michael's been a friend since 1964. We met at KMPC Radio, moved on to television at KTLA in 1965, and we've been in touch ever since then. Michael moved off out of the news profession and went into post-production as an extremely talented editor and producer, worked on a lot of network shows, all names of shows you'd recognize. And he was just the quintessential, all-around superior professional, as well as being an extremely nice man and a dear friend. Michael had a kidney transplant in December, and it seemed to go okay. I went to go see Michael and his partner, Gregory, and Gregory's in the room here today, in December in Phoenix after Michael had the transplant procedure at Mayo. For about a month and a half, it all seemed to be okay. They stayed at Mayo for that 30 days or whatever was required, came back here to California. Toward the end of February, Michael started developing a cough. And Gregory took him to the nephrologist. Nephrologist decided Michael needed to be hospitalized. And he never came out. He was at St. Joe's at first in Burbank, later transferred to UCLA. Exactly what happened, I'm not clear, but it was either a drug reaction or some sort of complication resulting from the kidney transplant in December. And Michael passed away on April 12th. He was 73. I'm not sure I've got my head around it at all. You have to know how much I miss him. Yesterday, Joel Tater came to my house, and we did what Michael and I have done in the past, and that's arrange the cards that you get, the name tags. When we started this group 8 years ago, Michael said, I'd like to help you however I can, but I don't know most of these people because I've been out of the business for so long. I said, you'll meet them. They're all wonderful people. They'll be welcoming. And a couple of years ago, he said, it's amazing. You know, when we do these cards, I know every one of these people now, and most of them I didn't know. So it's a difficult moment, but I want to share the moment with some of the other people who worked with Michael. Jeff, can I start with you, please? Jeff Wall, former news director at KTLA and KCOP, worked with Michael extensively, especially in the early days. Jeffrey?
Thank you, Bob. When I started in this business, when I was wet behind the ears at 17 and a half years old at KTTV, there were a group of people who really welcomed me and made me feel wonderful and that it was the right choice to go into journalism. Bob Tarlow was one of those people. Jack Terry was another. George Putnam, another. And Mike Conley. And Mike was like he was a bundle of energy. Ran around the newsroom like crazy, and he showed me all the equipment, all the stuff. And I learned so much from these people because these were truly my mentors. I remember Mike in front of a moviola. Do you remember moviolas? Anybody in the audience? And it was black and white film that was going through the moviola. And we would cut all the news on film, of course, before tape and now digital. And he just was a whiz. And he was very proud. He was also directing Hour of Power at the time, which was quite a show. And he just was so warm and welcoming. And I just am very grateful to Mike Conley and the others mentioned, and Jerry Rubin I left out. That was the other pillar at KTTV. And he will be sorely missed by me personally, and I know by many people in this room. Thank you.
These photos that you're seeing were all taken at Geezer meetings, and the gentleman on the right of Michael is Ted Hampf, who is an attorney in town and has been a member of this group from the beginning. Ted, please come up.
I've spent the last month trying to wrap my head around this too, and like Bob, it really has not been easy. It's, I'm reminded of one of the movies from a few years ago when, people just keep, getting better and escaping things, and then all of a sudden, a plate of glass falls on them or something, and that's kind of how I feel. It was scary when Michael went to Mayo. We talked constantly throughout that whole period, and it was exhilarating when he started to get better. And, the news, when things went south, was really quite devastating. But nonetheless, it was good to know that he had that exhilaration and the sense of having done what he felt was needed for him. I'm trying to put this in perspective, and this may make no sense to all but maybe 3 or 4 of you in this room. But the two themes that keep running through this is the volcano erupting in Hawaii and Mother's Day tomorrow. And let me try to explain this to you. Like me, like probably many other people, Michael was an only child and really had no family. We are his family. And I put that intentionally in the present tense. We are his family. Michael's friends were friends by choice. He chose us, we chose him. It's not like, the crazy Uncle Larry or the idiot brother who you have to put up with. Michael put up with us because he chose to, because he liked us, because in many cases he loved us. And I think that's really important and really something to hold on to. And the other thing is the volcano. The first time I met Michael, and unlike Bob, I thought I had known Michael for a long time. It turns out I'm a relative newcomer. I'd only known him for 45 years. But the first time I met him, there was Kilauea was erupting in Hawaii. You have never seen anyone so excited about something thousands of miles away. Michael loved the inexplicable, I guess, or the uncontrollable force of nature. And I, to my knowledge, flew to Hawaii several times over these many years to see Kilauea erupt. I don't think he had done it recently, but back then, that was a really big deal. And I think that's a lasting impression or a lasting memory in terms of the exhilaration, the excitement. One quick word about something that was just touched on. I mean, Michael did migrate from news into post-production. Michael was a bundle of energy, but he was also probably the most profound calming influence. I mean, he was the most reassuring force when everything was going wrong. Michael was always there. I mean, trite as it may sound, was the master of saying, you know, it's not a big deal, we'll fix it in post. Michael fixed more stuff in post for more people in this room, outside of this room, throughout this industry than almost anyone you could name, and did it better and left more lasting impression probably than anyone else. And like Bob, like Gregory, like many others, like Joel, I'm sure, we will miss him, but he'll also always be with us.
I met Michael Conley, I think about 1971. I had been hired to come out here and build a television truck and run that, and that truck became the one that did Hour of Power. And I met Michael about that time because he was directing, and we struck up a friendship, and I would also edit the show with him. That was back in the days we had two reel-to-reel VTRs, 2-inch quad machines, and we would do it by hand. You know, he'd roll one, I'd roll the other, manually press the edit button, and we edited the entire hour show that way. And we would do that every week. And we struck up a friendship that went on after Hour of Power quit after about 4 or 5 years. And we did all kinds of things. You know, we went to auto shows, electric cars, lunches. We just kind of had a very nice, casual, but very intimate friendship, which I very much appreciated. So, sorry. It was a special thing and a special relationship, and we just enjoyed each other's company, and I'll miss him very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Well, Michael, I hope you're watching and you're listening, and that there's an outlet of this PA in heaven, and that you can hear this program. Thanks for being a friend. Thanks for being part of it. And before we move along, I think we're going to be very, very fortunate and hear from Michael's longtime partner, Gregory Gutierrez. Gregory, would you come up? Gregory was with Michael throughout, and as loyal a partner and a friend as anybody could ever ask for in his life. Gregory?
Well, I don't even know where to begin, but I've had the pleasure of knowing Michael since 1973. We met each other through a German Shepherd at a party in the Hollywood Hills. We became fast friends and been inseparable since. He was working at KTTV with Bob, and Ted joined later. And he got me a job as a messenger. I took it, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, seeing Los Angeles like I'd never seen it before, and I'm born and raised here. Then a position actually at KTTV opened up in the newsroom as a production assistant. So I applied for it and got it, and worked the evening shows, worked the morning shows, and again, just blew me away. I mean, it was a wonderful job to get it done and get it out to the viewers, just incredible. There's no fame in it, just working and doing a nice job. Michael taught me a lot, and especially about this group. He worked tirelessly at home. You could really see how he worked at home and sat in front of the computer for hours. I just left him alone, and he would just work and work and work with Bob. And just, he was dedicated to this group. When I looked at the roster of names, boy, you guys just popped out to me because he just talked about all of you, just all of you. And you all seem personal friends just looking at the roster. It's been a wild ride for the last, actually 5 years, 5.5 years since Michael started his dialysis. He was so happy, he would fist bump in the air when he found out that he was no longer needed dialysis. he was just so happy. Then, unfortunately, things turned, and we did everything we possibly can. At least I hope we did everything as possibly can. I still question that. But I miss him so much. The house is empty. Yesterday was a bittersweet day. Our dog turned 2 years old. We had a nice party for him, the neighbors threw, and Michael was there in spirit. And I know he was looking down. He was looking forward to that day. But again, I want to thank you, every single one of you, for what you've done for Michael. And I feel it in my heart. I know he does too. His spirit is going to remain with all of us. My heart is really broken, and I miss him so much. But you meant so much to him. I really, really can't emphasize that more. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to take this time to honor a magnificent human being in his passing. Transitions are always difficult. They're difficult in newscasts, they're difficult at these lunches, but we need to make one. And we need to get a lot lighter, faster, which Michael would want us to do. So we're going to bring on a panel of two people. This was suggested to me by Ivor Davis, and I'm wondering, Ivor and Ray, can you both come up? And we're going to start Ivor Davis right behind me. Those of you who are regulars here have seen Ivor before because he is a writer for many British and American publications. He wrote the wonderfully exciting read called The Beatles and Me, which was about the first tour that the Beatles took, 64? 64. It's a wonderful book, and it's on Amazon. Just look up Ivor Davis and you'll find it. And Ivor's told you his story before, and I'm sure he'll be telling you some anecdotes here in a moment. And the discussion is kind of going to be anything about Hollywood coverage. We'll certainly open it up to questions. Ray, who is next to him, is Ray Richmond. He is a television critic, columnist, reporter for a number of publications. I mean, a big number. Hollywood Reporter.
And keep a job.
Hollywood Reporter, Daily Variety, LA Daily News, OC Register, the late Herald Examiner, and online Deadline Hollywood. In addition, Ray has a new business, and he is writing memoirs and personal biographies for people. And I looked on his website. It's an exciting project. I'm not sure anybody's doing anything quite what you're doing. The website is FamilySleuthMemoirs.com.
And there's propaganda material in back.
Yeah. There's propaganda material on the table where Dan is continuing to sell books. That's back there if you want to grab a sheet. So I think I've covered the two. Who wants to go first?
Get a fourth, Ray?
Certainly. Thank you,
And we're
Ivor.
going to open this up to questions. And when we do questions, I'm going to ask you guys to wait until Andrew can get there with a camera so we get a B-roll shot of you asking the question. In the meantime, I hand this over to Ivor Davis.
Thanks, Bob. Let me just say, as far as in terms of the transition, that I wish I had known Michael better. He just sounds like what a wonderful guy, and I'm so sorry that he's passed. And but boy, was he honored by all of you here. Thank you for doing that, everybody. My time covering entertainment started inauspiciously at the Daily News in 1984 when the TV critic quit, and they said, "You watch TV?" And I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, you want to be TV critic?" And I went, "Sure." And this was, I guess that was pretty much the qualification, was that I had watched television. So I found out soon enough that, being a critic is more than just watching. You have to watch a certain way, and it's very involved. And but I grew to love it. I ended up doing it for the Daily News, the Herald Examiner, Daily Variety, the Hollywood Reporter, the Orange County Register, many places, and I ended up becoming a columnist as well and covering the entertainment industry. And this was back, before, I don't know, when there was seemingly more honor in the profession in terms of coverage. it's a much tougher nut now. You know, the publicists and the gatekeepers have all the power. It's not, you know, you're under tight restrictions in terms of questions asked and everything else, and it's very tough. But I enjoy doing it a lot, just as I enjoy my transition now. You know, I think I sort of aged out of the business, or they aged me out, as many of you could probably relate to. But I had an awful lot of fun doing it, and a few stories that I will share after Ivor takes the microphone.
Thank you, Ray. And again, let me add to the somber but celebration of life that we just heard, and it was very, very moving. You know, we could have a panel of many more up here, because when I look, I mean, Linda and Carolyn Fox, they dealt with the publicists in Hollywood of yesteryear. Now, later on, I will show you my wounds, because I battled long and hard with some of these publicists back in the early days. Now, most of them are no longer here. And I'll just tell you one story. My late wife and I wrote a piece for Los Angeles magazine about the dreaded control of the publicists in Hollywood, because in those days you had to go through them, as Ray says. You know, they were the gatekeepers. They thought they had the power, and if they didn't like you, you didn't have an easy time. And some of these women, they were mostly women, that we confronted when we wrote this story about, I think I called them drunk with power. These ladies mostly, Pat Kingsley, I don't know if any of you know, but some of you in this room have, I'm sure, your own stories about dealing with the publicists and coping with Hollywood, because as Ray says, things have changed dramatically today. I'll just add one more thing, and I'm inclined to ramble on. You know, today, if a publicist's client did something bad, it would be around the world in 12 seconds. The internet has changed the whole picture. Now, Ray, I don't know if you would concur with that, but let me give you the microphone back.
Oh, no question. The internet has changed everything. It's everything is instantaneous now, you know. And every time a celebrity does something, if he trips on a crack in the sidewalk, somebody has either recorded it or reported on it or taken a picture of it. It's everywhere. It's all over the world instantaneously. I mean, this is why print journalism has so taken it on the chin and is a shadow of what it once was, because you have, you know, as soon as it hits your doorstep, it's 8 or 10 hours old. And now, if something is 8 or 10 minutes old, it's considered history and old news. And I'm not sure we're better for it, but it's a reality, you know. We have to acknowledge that the comprehensiveness and checks and balances and such have taken a backseat to immediacy.
Yeah. And you used to have a protective armor and a pith helmet when you went out to talk to stars, because, I mean, I want to tell you, it was a war zone out there. And I mean, for example, I must tell you, I remember vividly many years ago going to Tucson, Arizona, where Barbara Streisand was making a movie with Chris Christopherson called A Star Is Born, a remake of the old one. Terrible movie. Terrible movie. The old one was great. I think it was James Mason and maybe Judy Garland. Yeah. So there I am out there in, sorry, what was that? I'm out there in Tucson, Arizona, and I approach Barbara Streisand and I say, and I'd come out because I was writing a political story, who are the stars supporting? And I started to talk to Barbara about her political beliefs, and a guy called Lee Salters, who had, I think he lived with attack dogs. He made his reputation as being a fearsome protector of his clients, and I guess that was part of their job. But he sort of jumped on me and said, "You can't ask her that." Wow, why not? Because today you could ask the stars that, and they better answer. Because in this Me Too generation, they better give you an answer. They can't dodge it. And all these stories, I mean, Ray and I have been to many of the same events, and what happens is they do what they call press junkets, which are horrible because everybody gets the same old stuff, and you know, you don't get anything new. In the old days when you did one-on-ones, but anyway, I'm rambling on again, but I want to ask Ray about whether, you know, you found that, you know, running the interference by these publicists.
Oh, no question. But you know, when you said attack dog, it reminded me of a story that I have about Roseanne, since she's back. For better or for worse, I guess her show is really getting a lot of good notices and a lot of and good ratings. But I had my own experience with Roseanne. This was back in 1992. I don't know if anybody, you probably don't remember her then husband, Tom Arnold, had a show called The Jackie Thomas Show. And it lasted about, I don't know, a season and a half, where he was a writer. And anyway, I reviewed the show for the Daily News. And I actually gave it a pretty good review. I said that this show would be fantastic if Tom Arnold wasn't in it. Because everything about it is wonderful, except he can't act, and he's just a horrible eyesore, and his voice is grating. And so that morning, I got a fax from. It was delivered by 5 copy boys at the Daily News. I still remember. I'm like, oh, really? A fax? 5 copy people need to give me this fax, and they wanted to look at my reaction while I was reading the fax. And the fax said, "Thanks for the review. By the way," I don't know if I can say this in this room, "by the way, you're a fuckhead." And I'm like, good for her. Yeah. You know what? I would defend my man too. Good for her. And I didn't think another thing of it until about 10 minutes later, I get a call from the LA Times saying, "We understand that Roseanne has faxed you." And apparently she'd sent faxes to the LA Times, to USA Today, and me. She questioned the sexual orientation of the other guys, not me so much. And and I'm like, great, you know, suddenly, Entertainment Tonight, CNN, U.S. News and World Report, everybody is calling me for reaction. How does it feel to get dissed by Roseanne? And I had a guy from William Morris call me and say, "Do you want representation?" I'm like, what are you people talking about? This is going to be gone in 10 seconds. Anyway, so nobody knew who the hell I was, so I'm like, I think, you know what? I got to send the woman flowers for putting me on the map. So I sent Roseanne flowers, and she sent me back a note saying, "Thanks for the flowers, but you're still a fuckhead." And this started a whole new round of publicity. Roseanne sends poison pen note for flower delivery, you know, and it's like, oh my God. This just told me so much, Ivor, about the way Hollywood works and the way journalism works and how you can be the flavor of the minute. And that's especially true now with the internet the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, the whole picture has changed, at least since I was riding the Hollywood waves, because in the old days, all the studios maintained, I'm going back a few years, the studios maintained tight control over their stars. And you were quite friendly. I was friendly with Don Prince at 20th Century Fox, and whenever I had a spare afternoon, I'd stroll down and talk to Don and walk onto the studio. I mean, you don't do that anymore. And of course, in the old days, as most of you know, the studios controlled very tightly the publicity, and they had their favorites. They had the Headers and the Luellas and the Jim Bacons, and they knew that if they gave Jim a story, he would be forever grateful. I mean, he, you know, and I knew Jim personally, and Jim was a kind of guy that when he was having a drink, he'd go on for 2 hours about how pally he was with John Wayne, and Duke had him for dinner.
Smith, too.
What?
With Smith.
Liz Smith. Okay, well, there you go. So, again, there's a changing face to the face today, and I'll just add this because now, for example, there's a guy called, a leading PR guy in Hollywood called Howard Bragman. Well, he's a star because whenever they need something on the morning show or ABC or whatever it is, they bring on the publicists, and they become very learned gentlemen spokesmen. So the wheel has turned completely. And as I say, back in the back row there, Carolyn Fox dealt with publicists every day of her life. And Carolyn, they were sweet to you, weren't they? They were adorable to you. Is that a yes or a no? Yes, you said yes. Because Carolyn, served a wonderful purpose of spreading the word about their clients without doing intense, detailed interviews with them. So she dealt with them. She probably saw they were delightful. Anyway, go ahead.
Let me just say, most of the stars that I dealt with, and I interviewed many, were generally pretty good. I mean, the publicist was generally much more difficult to deal with than the star. Once you got past, the linebacker, the defensive line, it was easy to deal with. One of the exceptions to that rule, if I can dish here a little bit, right? Yeah. One of the exceptions to that rule was Bill Cosby. And, let me just say, the man clearly has gotten his just due now in hindsight. When we're at TCA, I don't know if you were at any of those, the TV Critics Association, twice a year they have big gatherings where they trot out the stars and journalists come and can ask questions of the panelists, and there's no spontaneity or exclusives whatsoever. And Cosby was there, and he would, during the Cosby Show era, this is the mid-'80s, late 80s, and he would be, every question that a journalist would ask, he would be like, that is the stupidest question I've ever heard. He was just a miserable SOB. And I'm just like, so when the stuff started piling up about him, everybody that was ever at TCA that witnessed that was standing up applauding. I could hear it in the ether.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell you another publicist story, because they were also, they were servants. They were on call 24 hours a day. Sounds like I'm running the defense fund. But anyway, the publicist, there was a guy who Bill, I can't remember his last name. He was a publicist for Danny Kaye. So I go and see Danny Kaye at CBS City, and I'm waiting for about an hour. And I suddenly get ushered into the inner sanctum for Danny, and Danny says, Bill, you didn't tell me Ivor was waiting for an hour. And he actually ripped the publicist off. I knew that was the biggest load of old BS. But put the blame on Mame. They put the blame on him. And this is what the publicist was. They were soldiers. Sometimes they were great soldiers. I mean, one other story that always, I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm doing a one-on-one interview. The publicist is lurking under the table out of eye shot of the star. And we talk about age, and I actually probably made the biggest mistake of my life, and I said to the lady star, how old are you? And the publicist leapt up and said, you don't have to answer that. Wow. Anyway, go ahead.
Those are the two questions you cannot ask, are how old are you and how much money do you have? When the publicist wasn't present, I generally got my best stuff. And even though this was not a typical interview situation, there was one time where I wrote a column, this is 2004, where I called out Oprah about, this was during the campaign where George W. Bush was running for re-election against John Kerry, and they were just name-calling, and it was, horrible. Of course, those are the good old days now. But at the time, it felt pretty consequential. And anyway, I called out Oprah. Why doesn't she have these guys on her show? This is, why does she stay apolitical? This is, horrible of her. The country's going to crap, and she can't care less. So anyway, this column runs, and that day I get a call about 2 o'clock. Ray Richmond, please. And I'm like, yes, this is speaking. So this is Oprah here. He's like, and I'm here with 6 of my producers, and suddenly I'm in a meeting with her on the phone, and I'm sitting there basically in my underwear at home. And I'm like, oh, hi, Oprah. What can I do for you? She's like, well, we read your column here today, and and I'm like, oh, you get it in Chicago, huh? She said, yes, we get it in Chicago, and we were wondering what you would do on the show to bring the presidential race to us. And I'm like, you really, I said, you really care what I think? And she's like, yes, we do. So for 15 minutes, I'm telling her what to do on her show. And she's like, and then I heard the worst words ever. Just as we're about to hang up, she says, by the way, this was all off the record. And I'm like, no, that can't be off the, what do you mean off the record? No, this is the greatest like exclusive I've ever had, where you're calling and asking me advice for your show. And she's like, no, sorry. But anyway, I told her she needed to get off her butt and be political. And she, of course, proceeded to do nothing for the rest of that campaign. But 2008, you may recall, she was out there stumping like crazy for Obama. All right? So until the current administration came in, let me just say that I called Oprah out, and the reason Obama won was partly because Oprah was out there stumping for him. So we can extrapolate that I saved the free world. Until, of course, it was unsaved again.
Gentlemen,
Along those lines.
Bill, watch the feedback back here for me, okay?
Can you hear us?
Gentlemen, Ivor, I want you to follow up with that, and then I'd like to start taking questions,
Yeah.
okay?
I just want one story that because you triggered it in my mind. So several years ago, and I'm not going to tell you who this actor is, but you're going to guess, I think. So I go along. He was a huge Hollywood actor, an action star, and he actually, I think he went on to higher political office. So I go into the office, I go into the hotel, and we are going to do an interview on his latest movie, and the publicist young lady sits down next to me on the couch, and then opposite is the star, and the star says, I don't want you in my sight. He said, go to the kitchen and get under the table. And the poor girl spent 45 minutes under the table because Arnold, that was a great impersonation, wasn't it? Because Arnold didn't want her in his sight. And then, of course, he went on to things, and now he's back being the great star that we know he is.
I'm glad he's so down to earth.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to hear about the Beatles.
Well, another day, because I think Bob wants to get on with it.
All right.